Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you, and joined now by broadcast partner on the Bills Radio Network, former center and host of the Centered on Buffalo podcast. It's Eric Wood joining us. Eric Wood's appearance is presented by Campbell's Chunky Soup. Big, craveable favorites collide in Chunky Soup's new Mac line, featuring flavors like Buffalo-style chicken mac, chili dog mac, and beefy mac. Stock up for game day now at your local Wegmans. Chunky Soup that eats like a meal. All right, Eric, we're not going to dwell on last Thursday very long, but we hear from Coach McDermott the day after the game, not looking good for Bernard or Spencer Brown going into this week's game against the Steelers. We saw Ryan Vandermark performing in that game. We saw Shaq Thompson with the green dot on his helmet running the defense. Maybe just parlay those substitutions in anticipation of those two playing going into next week and what is fair for fans to expect.
Yeah, Spencer Brown's one of the best right tackles in the National Football Leagues. When you lose a guy like that, there's always going to be some type of a drop-off. Now, Ryan Vandermark has starting experience with the Bills. He's been in the system his whole career, and it's a guy that they have a lot of confidence in. And I thought when he came in the game against Houston, which was a really tough situation to come in on the road late in the game where everyone's in a rhythm, he performed well. Now, obviously not perfect, but I thought he played well at the end, and he's a guy that the Bills have a ton of confidence in, and a guy that they won't necessarily have to be worried about. Shaq Thompson filling in for Terrell Bernard. Shaq Thompson's been one of our best linebackers, if not our best linebacker on the team this year. Obviously, age is not on his side. Part of the reason the Bills were able to get him this offseason and bring him into Buffalo, but a guy that's played well when he's been in there. And if his body can hold up, a guy that everybody should have a lot of confidence in running the middle of that defense.
And personnel aside, what will this defense do to kind of do more of what they did in the second half against Houston and less of what they did in the first half? They were on pace to give up 40 points in that game and then shut the faucet off, and they gave up 3 the rest of the way.
Yeah, the defense played great in the second half. You give up 3 points, and that came off of the Shakir fumble on the Bills' end of the field. So give the defense credit for what they were able to do in the second half. It's, and Bobby Babich talked about it on his interview with Chris last week for the pregame, that it's about getting to those adjustments sooner. You got to start the game fast, and they did start. They forced a punt on the first possession, and then it's continuing to maintain it throughout the first half, and it's starting better in games. Right now we have Bosa on the edge. His wrist is obviously bothering him. His pressure rate's gone from 15% to about 5% since he's had the wrist injury. He's gotten it out, but they got to find some way to get more consistent pressure on the quarterback. And then in the run game, they've got to be more successful early on in games. It's like they wait till the second half, figure out what they're doing, and then adjust. They've got to be able to get stops earlier in the game. And so, injuries with guys like Ed Oliver and Michael Hoyt, those guys aren't coming back. And if Ed does, it potentially be the playoffs. And so they've got to find some answers on the defense side of the football in getting off the field earlier in games, especially when you have an offense that's not clicking on all cylinders either.
And then, spinning it forward to the Pittsburgh game, let's assume, Vandermark starting at right tackle. What kind of protection plan would you anticipate knowing TJ Watt's on the other side?
You're likely going to give him a lot of attention, whether it's chips, making sure you're sliding in that direction to potentially have the guard help out as well. You're going to have a lot of attention on TJ Watt through that game, and they're not just going to throw Ryan Vandermark out there to the Wolves. Now, there's going to be times where he's going to have to win one-on-one matchups against TJ Watt. You just don't want him to have to do it 30, 40 times throughout the game against Pittsburgh. And Joe Brady talked about it on Friday, that he wished he would have provided more help for those tackles throughout the game. And so I'd suspect that we'll see that. Now, Houston's a different animal because you have 2 great edge rushers. And so at times it can be more difficult to provide those chips when you have those guys on both sides. Pittsburgh has other quality pass rushers, but no one that creates a duo like we faced last week against Houston with Will Anderson Jr. and Daniil Hunter on the other side.
Obviously, last week, the Bills' offensive line seemed to be almost overwhelmed by that Houston pass rush. How do those conversations go that actually you're watching that film and you've got this, you got to you kind of got to wind it up and go to the next game. I know how that is. Give us an idea of what the offensive line was thinking as they watched that film and what they've got to do in the coming weeks to get ready for Pittsburgh on the road.
Yeah, those meetings the next day after a game like that are never fun. Now, Cromer's not going to sit there and yell and scream. I'm sure it wasn't a fun meeting to be in, but it's not going to be berating the players. It's going to be, what do we need to do more moving forward to be more successful? Was it a technique thing? Was a scheme at times where we maybe need to chip or whatever it may be? Is it, an effort thing? Whatever it may be, you're coaching to be able to put out a better product the following week. This has been one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Obviously, last week was not their strongest performance. Interior, the tackles, everybody took their turns getting beat. The spotlight's on those tackles out on the edges, but nobody plays a perfect game. Nobody played a great game when you have a performance like that with the offensive line. And so I have a lot of confidence in this group moving forward, and then in this game against Pittsburgh to really rebound, because like I said, this is, especially pass blocking, been one of the best groups in the NFL for a couple of years now.
We know that their performance on the road has not been nearly what it's been at home, and we are all smart enough to know it's harder to run your offense, in a loud environment, especially pre-snap motion and things of the like. How do they kind of rectify that, Eric? Because the point production on the road, with the possible exception of the Carolina game and the Jets game, has been tough to come by. They don't look like the same offense.
Yeah, and it's a veteran group, so you don't expect them to have troubles with the silent cadence. We have the same center that we've had the last couple years, same quarterback, same operation. So you have to look at, okay, what's causing, some of these issues. At times it's, the clock's running down late and you can't necessarily use the quarterback to hard count those situations. They're getting a great jump on the ball. Okay, so can we get to the line of scrimmage earlier? Are there different answers in the pass game that doesn't put as much pressure on Josh and the offensive line? Maybe some quicker first down throws, the option routes, quick slants, finding some answers there. And then ultimately, anytime you can establish the run on the road, that's always going to help, and it helps take the crowd out of it. And so getting back to what's been their bread and butter a majority of this year and being able to run the football effectively can help as well.
What do you think has been the problem of late running the football? Certainly, they're not giving James Cook as many touches in that part of the game as they usually do because of the lack of production. How do you get back on track with that? What's the best way?
Yeah, I think against Miami and Tampa, they were stacking the box. That wasn't necessarily the case against Houston. Houston was flying around, and they were physical in their run fits. They tackled well, and give Houston credit, because it wasn't necessarily loaded boxes that they were running into, which slowed the run game down. Like I mentioned, where we saw against the Dolphins in the Bucs a week ago in Orchard Park. And so, it's finding some variety, as well as also leaning into what you do best: the duo runs, the counters, the inside-outside zone, which can either be run on the outside, either a handoff or the pitches like we saw against Carolina. But it's getting back to that, finding the play action off of it that also mirrors what you're doing out there game plan wise, which I felt like we've done a good job at times this year. But, those play action passes aren't nearly as threatening when you're not running the football effectively. There was a couple times against the Texans where we ran play action and their backers didn't even come downhill at all. They were anticipating it. And so it's being able to establish the runs that those play action passes can open up some things at the second and third level of the defenses.
Eric, I know we talked about it on the pregame roundtable after the inactives came out and we discovered that Keon Coleman was sitting for a second straight week. We believed it had more to do with what the guys that were in the lineup against the Bucs did on the field in terms of performance than anything that Keon Coleman did right, wrong, or indifferent through the course of the practice week. But after that performance on the road, where the passing game struggled mightily, do we think that the door swings back open for Keon Coleman to get back in the lineup this week?
Yeah, I think so. And when you look at his talent, as long as he's handling things in the facility throughout the week, you want to get him reps. You got to see what you got in this guy. I mean, you drafted him where you did for a reason, because the talent is there. And so I would suspect that he would be back in the lineup this week, but especially considering we didn't have the same passing success as we did against the Bucs. But he's got to earn that opportunity. And Sean McDermott is, he's fair. I'll say that. Sean is fair. If you put in the work and you earn the opportunity, he's going to play the best guys and the guys that he and this coaching staff trust. So if Keon can earn that trust back, that he could be a reliable teammate and member of this organization throughout the week, I'd suspect that we'll see him back out there, because when you talk about the talent that he does have, if he can develop and continue to get better, this is a guy that could potentially be a factor down the road.
All right, so we talked about the run game, and we get it as this is a perfect, in a perfect world, it's 50-50 balance. But what would you like to see the Bills do in their passing game a little better that they haven't been able to do? Certainly it's been a focal point for a lot of people. The wide receiver room's been a point of emphasis. People have been having conversations about needing a big-time number one guy, and certainly, and I've always said, if you get better players, you're going to play better. But what are they going to do? What would you like to see from their passing game that we haven't seen enough of?
Yeah, I thought against the Bucs we had some great game plan specific passes, especially those 2 plays, the touchdowns to Ty Johnson and James Cook, finding ways to manufacture some guys open like those, for example. I think if Kincaid's able to come back for this game, that's obviously a factor. Even if he's not getting the ball, he takes a lot of eyes from the defense to potentially open other guys up. But if he's able to come back and be healthy, he could be a factor to keep working him back in. And then you get Palmer and Kincaid on the field together, which has been rare this season. Those are likely your 2 best pass catchers and route runners on this team. And so, to me, it's finding some of those schemed throws, those quick hitters, like I was saying earlier, to, on 1st and 10, 2nd and medium to long, finding those ones that get you close to the sticks and keep you on schedule. And then ultimately, guys got to make plays. Josh has got to make plays with his arms. And guys got to make plays out there for him, like we saw against the Bucs and other times this year. Second half against the Ravens, we're just not finding it consistent enough right now.
Eric, thanks for the time. We appreciate it. We'll see you up in Pittsburgh, so have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you up there this weekend.
Okay, sounds good. Happy Thanksgiving, guys, and have a great rest of the week.